immigrants. So that's something that I want to share with you today, both my experiences as an immigrant living in Japan, but also part of my content that I teach to my third year students in my Canadian Studies class. So throughout, I'll have a few questions. Okay, I hope you're all well. Um, I understand it's also already very hot there. I think today in Nagano, it'll get up to about 20, 22 degrees. It's still very mild here. But next week will be a nice week-long holiday called Golden Week. So I'm looking forward to that. All the students will have 1 week off, and then we'll come back and study till the end of July. Okay. So is everybody ready and awake? Are you okay?
Trying.
There may be okay. And yeah, I hear some of you have contacted some of the Seisen students. I think that's wonderful. Today we actually have a colleague from Canada, from the University of Calgary visiting, because in May we will have our online exchange with University of Calgary students. So yeah, always exciting times. Okay, so let me jump to my slides. Can everybody see those? There we go. Yep, can everybody see that? No problem, right? Okay. And throughout, thank you, Zoe. And throughout, if you have a question, please jump in. Yeah, feel free to ask or leave questions in the comments. And I will ask you a few questions throughout so you can leave your answers in the chat box. So, there we go. Okay, so basically the title is A Canadian in Japan, and the subtitle is Living Happily in Another Culture. And I just want you to think about that, because maybe some of you in the future, you will decide to live in another country. But also there will be people, non-Taiwanese, living in your country. So this is an issue I'm very, very interested in. So this is what I look at in my Canadian Studies class. And a little bit about my background. I think I introduced myself last year, but some of you may not know. Of course, I was born in Vancouver, Canada, but my father is English and my mother is Canadian. Okay, that's very, very common in Canada. Interestingly, I never wanted to leave Canada. When I was your age, I never imagined I would be living in another country. I always thought I would live in Vancouver. I remember in university when I had a job interview and they asked me if I would live in Toronto, which is a city in central Canada. And I said, no, thank you. I don't want to live in another city. When my father was working and he was asked to move to another city, he said no. He quit the job and found another job. He didn't want to leave Vancouver. So I never thought I would leave. But my father left England. My mother left Ottawa. Ottawa is the capital of Canada. It's in central Canada. So maybe I am like my parents. In university, something I was always passionate about was teaching. I taught teaching. I taught skiing to children, sailing to children. I taught a little bit of music to children. But I wanted to work in a company. I wanted to study commerce at a university. I did study commerce at university because I wanted to work in a company and I wanted to be rich. And I never considered being a teacher. But while I was a university student, I started taking jobs related to my major, which was marketing. And I didn't like them. I didn't like them at all. So I started rethinking. And then I visited Japan. I was only going to stay for 3 months. I didn't plan to stay long. It was just my first time traveling overseas by myself. but I never left Japan. I'm here 29 years later. I think it'll be 30 years this December. Yeah, so be careful when you travel abroad. You never know what happens. And in Nagano, I started teaching. And I also met Keiko at that time. So I fell in love with teaching, and then I fell in love with Keiko. So that's why I'm still here. Uh, my Someone in my family asked, "What part of Japanese culture do I love? Why did I stay in Japan?" I didn't stay because of the culture. I stayed because of Keiko, which is kind of funny. Um, that's more important. But then while I was a student, while I was living in Japan, I knew I had to go back to school. So I did my master's in TESOL, which maybe you know, which is teaching English to speakers of other languages. So it's teaching English to, for example, Japanese students or Taiwanese students. And of course, we started a family. So that's why my title is Living Happily in Another Culture. And you never know. You are all very, very young. You're maybe 20. So you don't know what your future will be. I certainly didn't. When I was your age, I never imagined I'd be in Japan teaching English. Never imagined. And there's Keiko. And she is a farmer, actually. And she grows a type of mushroom called enoki. And for me, this is a special picture because this is, I think in 2019, we had a flood and her factory was flooded. And so for a couple of months, she could not produce mushrooms, but this is the first batch. It's in late December. None of the machines were working, but she still could produce mushrooms about 10 weeks later, which was amazing. So this is a very special picture for us. Yeah, it's called enoki. It's sometimes the English name is winter mushroom. It only grows in cold climates. Yeah, but she only sells it around Japan. She doesn't export it to other countries. Okay, so at Seisen, where I work, for third year students, I have a class called Canadian Studies, which I enjoy teaching. But more important than Canadian Studies, I think, is international understanding. And this is Yabuta Sensei's area of expertise. Because I think when we teach a language, you can't just teach a language, you also have to teach international understanding. So I tried to do that in my Canadian Studies class. And Canada, there we go, there's the name for enoki. Canada, it's important to know, is a country of immigrants, okay? In fact, 1 in 5 people who lives in Canada, 1 in 5 people was born in a different country, okay? We have a very small population. Right now, I think it's 38 million. 38 million. I'm not sure the population of Taiwan. Japan is about 125 million. So we have a much smaller population than Japan, but we're the second largest country in the world. So immigration is very, very important to us. And as you know, I think everybody knows, Japan's population is declining. It is, it is falling. Maybe Taiwan is a little bit similar. I'm not too sure. But the other thing is Japan's tourism is booming, is very, very popular. Many, many people are coming to Japan. They have been for a long time, but now because the Japanese yen is very, very weak, very weak, there's a lot of people coming to Japan because it's cheap, okay? Now, what's interesting about Japan is Japan accepts foreign laborers, but Japan doesn't really accept immigrants. So the difference is a foreign labor moves to a country for a short period of time, maybe about 5 years. Now, an immigrant is someone who moves to another country for a much longer period of time, maybe the rest of their lives. So the Japan policy is to accept foreign laborers, but not immigrants. There's some exceptions. For example, Japanese Brazilians. They will allow people, or sometimes Japanese descendants in, for example, China. They do allow some people to immigrate, but very small numbers. Okay? My limited understanding of Taiwan, I've only visited twice, is that many Taiwanese study and travel overseas. Okay? A lot of people go overseas to school, like Tim did, and many people travel overseas. Okay? I think many of you have traveled overseas. A little bit difficult because when you were junior high school, the coronavirus pandemic, so much more difficult for you, but now we can start to travel again. But my image is many Taiwanese do study and travel abroad. That's my image. Okay. Interesting fact is that among young Japanese people, Taiwan and Korea are the most popular destinations for a working holiday. So many young Japanese people do go to Taiwan for a working holiday. Working holiday is usually about 1 year. I believe they go because they want to learn Mandarin. But I was surprised. It's some years Taiwan is number one, some years Korea is number one, and it changes. But for young Japanese people, Taiwan is very, very popular place to visit, as well as Korea. The other two were actually Australia and France. They are always 3 and 4. I think Australia to learn English and France to learn French, of course. So in this class, we talk about these two questions. What do people think about immigrants? What do Canadian people think about immigrants in Canada? What do Japanese people think about immigrants living in Japan? And what do you think about immigrants living in your country? And the second question we're going to look at today is, how do immigrants approach living in a new country? So if you live in another country, what is your approach? We're going to talk about these two questions today, okay? So in my class, we look at this through some research, which I'll introduce today. We also look at it through literature. Sometimes we will use a book, sometimes a movie, sometimes a short story to understand these issues. In Canada and North America and United States, a very common novel type, a very common movie type is called the immigrant novel. It is a story about someone moving to Canada, a story about someone moving to the United States, the problems they have and the success they have. Interestingly, in Japan, this is not a common movie type or a common novel type. You rarely see it. I'm interested about Taiwan, whether that is a theme in Taiwanese movies or books. It could be the experiences of Taiwanese living in other countries. Yeah. So here is a piece of research. It was conducted by the Pew Research Center. And they have a question. What does it take to be one of us? What it takes to truly be one of us? So what does it mean to be Japanese? What does it mean to be Canadian or Taiwanese? So they didn't ask Taiwanese people this question, but they asked hundreds of people this question. They asked hundreds of Canadians. I think they asked about 1,000 Canadians, 1,000 Japanese, and 14 different countries. They asked a lot of people, okay? When you think about Taiwan, when you think about Japanese culture, what do you think about? What does it mean to be Japanese? What is important? That's a really difficult question. So what they did, they asked these questions. They asked the people, how strongly do you agree or disagree with these statements? So having been born in our country is very important for being truly Japanese. So to be Japanese, you have to be born in Japan. Okay. The underline, they would change that for each culture. So for example, for Canadians, having been born in our country is very important for being truly Canadian. Okay. What do you think? For Canadians, maybe you can guess, it's not that important because Canada's a country of immigrants. We expect people to move there. It's relatively easy to move there. Or if you want to study in Canada, it's relatively easy to do so. Canada accepts many students. Canada accepts many immigrants, okay? But how about Japan? And what do Japanese people think? The next thing they asked is about language. For example, being able to speak Japanese is very important to truly being Japanese. So how important is language? Of course, in Canada, they asked about English and French because Canada has 2 official languages. So if you want to live in Canada, how important is the English language? How important is the French language? The last one is about, the next one is about sharing national customs and traditions is very important for being truly Japanese. For Canada, they asked the same question, but maybe just in the comments box very quickly, when you imagine Japanese customs and traditions, what do you imagine? Okay, everybody, you can start typing a little bit. When you imagine Japanese customs, Japanese traditions, what do you think of? It could be something like the clothing you wear. It could be something like the holidays you celebrate. When you think of Japanese customs and traditions, what do you think of? Yeah, like kimono. Many people think that. And what's interesting, when I ask my students, many of them do not own a kimono. Many of them have never worn one. Yeah. And Janet, manners, yes. Manners is very important in Japan. And etiquette. For example, when you greet someone, bowing is very important, right? And the depth, right? How deep the bow is very important. So for a friend, it's a very shallow bow. For someone very important, it's much, 90 degrees. That's very, very important. Yeah. So manners, yeah. So it could be something like bowing, right? But for example, in my culture, things that would be important would be like eye contact. And when you shake a hand, it's a very firm handshake. That can be it. Okay? Yeah. Anything else? Manners can be, it could be something like the summer festivals that people celebrate, right? Whether it's something like Golden Week, a very informal festival, but sometimes your community festival can be very, very important. In August, they have something about called Obon, where they welcome their ancestors back to their home for 3 days, and the family gathers and they say goodbye to the ancestors. So very, very important. Yeah, conservative. I think the Japanese character can be a little bit conservative, a little bit not reserved, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that can be done. Okay. Anything else? It could be the drinking culture. That definitely was the case. I think it's actually less important now, but that is that image. The employee has to drink with the boss after work. Yeah, yeah, the work culture. I don't experience that at SACEN. It's a very it's a university and it's a missionary school. So yeah, we don't have that culture. Yeah. Anything else? Could be things, something simple like when you buy a train ticket, people will always line up and wait their turn or to get onto a
Right.
train. It can be something very informal like that. Okay. During the coronavirus pandemic, every Japanese person was wearing a mask. The government asked them to please wear a mask. Everyone did, but in Canada, not many people wanted to. Yeah, and there's fun things like fireworks festivals. Yeah, yeah. People, yeah, queuing all the time, following the rules. Yeah. Here's a difficult question. How about Canada? When you think about Canadian customs and traditions, what is your image of a Canadian? What's your image of Canada? This is actually hard.
Yeah. Sorry, Greg, to like jumping. Even for me, I don't have a very good understanding about Canadians or Canada or the Canadian culture.
Yeah.
I'm probably encouraging everybody to say something about this question, right? And I would just share my part because yeah, it's not thinking. Anyway, guys, Greg Sensei was asking you what is your image about Canada or Canadian culture. You can write something at the chat box. To us, it's probably easier to talk about Japan, right? So go ahead, go ahead.
Seafood. Yeah. In terms of food culture, yeah. For sports, definitely ice hockey. That's the most popular sport. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. It's a very violent game. But that's very, very popular. Yeah, anything to do with like maple syrup is kind of the image. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's seafood. Yeah, the salmons, the smoked salmons, and
Mm,
things like
mm,
that. So
mm,
it could
mm,
be food culture. Yeah, majestic mountains. So when people think of Canada, they do think of nature. Um, whether it's the Rocky Mountains or the coast, or yeah, yeah, yeah. This is much harder, isn't it? And the reason this is hard is because Canada is a country of immigrants. We don't really have one culture. Yeah, 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 yeah. The winter, of course, as Lynn mentioned. Um, Parts of Canada, the climate is like Norway, Sweden, Finland. It is very cold. Vancouver is actually warmer than Nagano. Vancouver has a very mild climate. Yep. And our cities like the Torontos, the Vancouver, Montreal's, very multicultural, very vibrant. Polar bear, I've never seen one. Yeah, Yellowknife, you can freeze to death. Yes. Yeah, that happens. And multiculturalism, yeah. Canada was the first country to have a policy of multiculturalism, 1971. They wanted to make sure everybody could be accepted in Canada. Yeah. Interestingly, it used to be English versus French, or English speaking Canadians versus French speaking Canadians. They wanted to change that discussion. So the prime minister introduced this policy of multiculturalism, which interestingly, the current prime minister, does anybody know? His name is Justin Trudeau. His father introduced that policy in 1971, Pierre Trudeau. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So thank you. So I think a good place to see aurora. Zoe, I've never seen the aurora. I'm from Vancouver. It's much farther south. Yeah. Oh. Tim, I don't know the question. What is the staple food in Canada?
Because when I
don't know.
because I was wondering what because it took. I don't know. It's kind of also a very funny question to ask the students to, if they think of America, what kind of food
Yeah.
will come to their mind. So when I was in the States and then people did this survey to the Americans, I would be asking the class to type, okay, what comes to your mind if you think about American food? Okay, just type it there. Okay, number one. When you think of American food, what would come to your mind? Everybody, please try and type. I will tell you the answers of what I got from a Canadian friend.
Yeah, Stella Spam. Ooh, bagels. Now that's
seriously?
delicious. Hamburger, yes.
Okay. See, the images are pretty clear. Oh, pizza. Yeah, did you guys notice none of them is from America?
Yeah. Except Spam.
Yeah, I
Does
just had
everybody
one
know?
yesterday.
Really?
Yeah. Stella, do you want to turn on your microphone? Explain to the class what spam is. You are just amazing knowing the word and the food.
It's like a canned food, and it's easy to eat. You just fry it.
Yeah. And
You probably heard
it's
it.
a meat product, right? It's basically canned meat.
You probably heard it in the Philippines, right?
In
I
Okinawa,
don't
it's very
remember.
popular. Have you eaten it, Stella?
I don't think so.
Really? And how do you
Or
know?
maybe I did, but I just forgot.
Yeah.
Okay, because my son was really curious. So last weekend I went to Hansen, and in the supermarket they have plenty of choices. So I bought one, and my wife is making it out of sandwiches, and it just I didn't like the taste. Okay, barbecue, hot dogs, pretzel. Yeah, I'll probably just type it here what I get. This is the answer that I got from my Canadian friend. What is the staple food for the Canadians? And he told me what American eats times 6.
Oh, we eat 6 times the amount?
Yes,
Oh, really?
this is just a stupid joke. And
Yeah.
even one time I was at the University of Calgary cafeteria.
Yeah.
It was the morning time, so we were at the restaurant for the breakfast. And my mom noticed that because everything is all you can eat, my mom noticed that we probably have like a one boiled egg as a breakfast.
Right.
And the Canadian couple sitting right next to us, each one of them was having 6. Yeah, seriously, right?
That's strange.
Yeah, but of course their size is big. So
Yeah,
food can
that's
be a very a good way to probably to know some of the culture. Okay, thank you guys.
Okay. So let's see what the answers are. And here, the first, the answers, relatively few say national identity is strongly tied to birthplace. So being born in Canada is not important to Canadians, right? We don't feel to be Canadian, you must be born in Canada. We don't think it's important. Only 21% of Canadians think being born in Canada is very important. But interestingly, Japan, it is important, right? 50% of Japanese think being born in Japan is very important. Yeah. So how about Taiwan? That's interesting. I don't know. The only Asian country was Japan. Some countries in Europe, like Hungary and Greece, it's very, very important. But some countries in Europe, Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands, it is not important at all. So this is quite different. Yeah. How about Taiwan? I don't know. The other thing is about languages. The very first one is being able to speak our native language. So in many countries like Australia, Japan, the US, being able to speak English or Japanese is very, very important. Okay. In Europe, the median was 77%. So very, very high. But Canada, it was the lowest. So less important in Canada. I was a little bit surprised by this. Okay. Maybe Taiwan is like Japan, or maybe like Europe. Being able to speak Mandarin is very important in Taiwan. Maybe. That's my image. This, for me, was shocking. Sharing national customs and traditions. In Japan, it was quite low. It was only 43%. I was shocked by this. So maybe they don't expect immigrants to share their customs, or I don't know. But in Canada, it's very high, 54%. Because when I asked you about Canadian customs and traditions, that was very hard to write an answer. When we talk about Japan, it's very easy. For some reason, Canadians, this is important, and I'll explain why later. The last one had to do with religion. In many countries, being a Christian is not that important, right? For Canadians, only 15%. But in the United States, it is important. In areas in the United States, it is very, very important, okay? Now, with respect to religion, they didn't ask this question in Japan. Yeah, they didn't ask about being Buddhist, which was really interesting, okay? But again, the percentages are higher for older people than for younger people. So maybe your parents, your grandparents will have a different opinion than you because you are much younger, right? So not all Canadians are the same, not all Japanese are the same. Older people, usually, they think language is more important. They think being born in the country is more important. Speaking the local language, so for Japanese, 70% of Japanese people think speaking Japanese is very important. That makes sense. To live in this country, to live in Japan, you really do need to speak Japanese. But in Canada, only 59%. I was really shocked by this. There are some areas, like in Vancouver, that area, there's one area called Richmond, has a very large population of Chinese speakers, primarily from mainland China. So in that community, I think it's possible to live using the Chinese language like Mandarin, right? For me, I think speaking Japanese is very important in rural Japan. Do you know rural? Rural is like countryside, okay? Maybe in Tokyo, it's less important. Maybe in Osaka, it's less important. But if you're in the countryside, it's very, very important, I feel. Now, sharing national customs and traditions is very important, but only 43% of Japanese people think it's important. I'm shocked by this. I'm surprised. I think sharing national customs is very important, as I forget who mentioned manners. Maybe Janet mentioned manners. Waiting in line, bowing. Those customs are very, very important. Sharing traditions maybe is only important. Many of my students don't wear a kimono on a regular basis. They don't practice the tea ceremony. Those traditional cultures are less important, I feel. They're important, but not very important. But in Canada, why was Canada the highest? To be honest, I think many customs and traditions are based on Christianity, like our Christmas holidays and New Year break. There's many festivals or events around that. Some immigrants don't want to celebrate that. They don't want to sing these Christmas songs at school. So some Canadian families are shocked by that. I think that is the reason, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Okay. But my question for you is, having been born in our country is very important to being truly Taiwanese. What do you think? And what do you think your parents think? Are you like Japan? It's very high, 70%, I think. Or is it much lower? My image is it's lower than Japan, is my image. I think Taiwanese people travel more, is my image. Yeah. But then how about your language? Being able to speak Mandarin is very important to being truly Taiwanese. Or the Taiwanese language. Is the pronunciation, Tim, Hokkien? Hokkien? Is that
Yes, it's wonderful. It's wonderful, perfect pronunciation. So actually, even people debate about the way we are calling it because it's a dialect spoken by the southeastern part of China.
Oh, okay.
So actually, there's an engineer right now working for OpenAI, and he came up with an online simultaneous translation machine. You talk to the computer will translate English back to Hokkien.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Because he's probably from here, and his parents, like my parents, who are all from Hokkien. It's a province, southeastern, the one that near Taiwan. So, in the language was it's being spoken there and here. Some people prefer calling it Taiwanese, but if you use the term, yeah, maybe people from mainland China will feel upset.
Okay. Okay.
But Hokkien will be linguistically the right term.
Okay. And then the last one, about the indigenous language, Hakka, which I believe is only spoken by 5% of the population or something like that.
Maybe a little bit more. Last time
Yeah.
I checked was about 11 to 13%.
Okay.
And from my memory, some of our students in this class actually are from that uh, group, and I wonder if they can speak. Last time I checked, I think Ling actually is from Hakka family,
Mm.
and I wonder if she can speak. Ling, can you speak Hakka?
Hakka. I no.
Yeah, same thing happening to families who speak Hokkien because maybe the grandparents use that, like my mom, my father.
Yeah.
But my two kids are actually pretty fluent in Hokkien.
Oh.
And maybe for family like Ling, and right now it's been going on for a while. I believe everybody in this class actually study officially at elementary schools.
Oh,
It's being a
interesting.
policy being implemented by the new DPP party. They want everybody to choose their home language and try to study at school. Even the indigenous, from the Aboriginal people, they get to choose I would say about 13 to 15 different choices.
Wow.
Right now it's tough.
Wow.
Okay.
So that's interesting, how important language is to your identity. Oops, too early. The last one is sharing national customs and traditions is very important for being truly Taiwanese. You tell me, what Taiwanese customs and traditions do you imagine? Can you type them in the box? Like, what are the Taiwanese customs and traditions? If you have to answer this question, what do you imagine?
This one is tough.
This one, yeah, it is. It's very tough. Like,
as a local, even I mean, answering this one is probably more difficult than answering for the Canadians, even though we are all from here. Okay, so guys, try. What comes to your mind when you think about Taiwanese customs and traditions? Something we have to do. And
Visiting temples or shrines, things like that.
cleaning their ancestors' ohaka, okay, the tombstone. Okay, last time I asked them, okay, before spring break. Spring break in Taiwan is actually for visiting your ancestors, but very low percentage of them actually go. So, what comes to your mind, guys? Can you try to type on the chat box?
That's really difficult. Pocket money. Okay. Is that during like a New Year's?
Yes,
During the New Year's to
It's
give children
it's
pocket
a big burden, big disaster.
money?
If
The red
you-
envelope. I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, if you start making money, if you are young, if you are kids, that's the best day of the year.
That's cute.
What else? Okay, cool. So I like it. I like the idea. Red envelope is very common. Okay. Dumpling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could be the food culture and your tea culture, your amazing tea culture.
Greg Sensei actually went to Yang Bao. Moon cakes. Very important too.
So it's
Oh.
interesting, like when we think customs, like when you greet someone, do you have a different language that you use for your teachers than you use with your friends? Of course, I think you do. In Japan, it's very clear, even at work, the language you use with your senior is different from the language you use with someone younger than you. So sometimes that's expressed through language. And we were talking yesterday, Seisen students have a manners class, an etiquette class for when they enter the company. They have to be aware of the manners that are expected of them. But like when you start a job in Taiwan, do you have a class at your university to prepare you? The language you use, the clothes you wear, the way you act? I think before lunch, everybody's talking about food, the food culture.
It's interesting. Okay, most of them think about something that we do. I think mooncakes are quite common, and then
And Tim, can I go on to the next one?
sure.
Yeah, just because I got a roll here. Cute picture, right? This is one of my favorite pictures of Tim and I when I first visited. Oh my golly, 2014. We were at the school. We were at your school festival, so I think that's just. I love this picture. My favorite picture of Tim and I. Oh, blue and white slippers. Yeah, and just a couple of personal pictures. What I love to do. My passion is cross country skiing and cycling. But interestingly, in terms of Japanese culture, I actually played the bamboo flute in our local festival. So it's kind of interesting that I have experiences which other Japanese people don't have. I was actually playing the solo for the lion dance. And there's people in our community who have never done that. So it's kind of interesting how we, when we do enter. But the next topic I want to talk about is how do immigrants approach living in a new country? So, for example, if you move to another country, what is your approach? And there's this idea called a culturation. You can see the word culture. And this means when you move to a new country, you must adapt to the new cultural environment. So how you change, how you adapt. This is called a culturation. So what's really interesting is all of the Taiwanese students have English names. None of the Japanese students have English names. So that's kind of an example, right? And everybody adapts differently based on two key issues. And the first one is if you emigrate to another country, migrate simply means to move. The E means like exit, to leave a country. If you emigrate to another country, how important is your heritage and identity? So, for example, how important is your Taiwanese culture to you? How important is your Taiwanese identity to you? For example, when you ask a Canadian, many Canadians say, I'm Canadian, I'm not American. And so maybe that's something that we share, because maybe you will also say, I am Taiwanese, I'm not Chinese. So I think that's quite similar. So this first idea is the degree to which people wish to maintain their cultural heritage and identities. So for me, my Canadian culture is very, very important. My family name is Birch. When I got married, I did not change it to Kasuga, my wife's name. My nationality is Canadian. I didn't take Japanese nationality. I didn't change my passport. But you have to ask questions like, how important are things like your customs? Like for me, Christmas or Thanksgiving. Some of those are very, very important for me to continue in Japan. Christmas is very, very important. It's a family time. It's when we get together. In Japan, it's a romantic holiday. New Year's is the family time. But in my culture, Christmas is the family time. New Year's is the fun time with your friends, right? It could be your religion. Do you want to continue practicing your religion? Christianity is not that important for me. I'm not a practicing Christian, although I work at a Christian school. But for some people, their religion is very, very, very important to them. Sometimes it could be things like clothes you wear. But again, like for Japanese people, you have kimonos, you have yukata, which is an informal kimono, but they don't really wear them, right? And the other one is the degree to which people wish to have contact with those who are outside their group and participate with them in their daily life of the larger society. So for example, for me, when I moved to Japan, how important is it to spend time with Japanese people at school? Like, do I send my son to a Japanese school or an international school? At work, do I work for a Japanese company or do I work for myself? In my free time, do I spend time with Japanese people or do I spend time with other non-Japanese? So this is these are the 4 strategies that you can actually use. So for me, the first issue, maintenance of heritage, culture, and identity, this is my Canadian culture, my Canadian identity. For me, it's very, very, very important, okay? Because if I change my name to Kasuga, my wife's name, Japanese people laugh, right? So because my culture is important to me, I can choose separation or integration. Before I talk about that, issue number 2 is relationships sought among groups. How important is it for me to spend time with other Japanese people? Do I go to school together with them? Do I work together with them? Do I spend my free time with them? For me, it's very, very important. But the biggest problem was language. If you cannot speak the Japanese language, you cannot integrate. So in the top left corner, we have this word integration. That means your culture is important and you want to spend time with people in that culture. For me, I think I started at separation. I was separate. I worked separately and I only had Japanese friends who spoke English. So my first strategy was separation, but I've been here almost 30 years. So I'm slowly going towards integration, but I will never integrate because people see me, they see a white Canadian, and they don't know, am I a tourist or do I live here? Every week, not every week, every month, someone will ask me, are you enjoying your stay in Nagano? How many days are you in Nagano for? 30 years. When I took, we took the Taiwanese students skiing. We took them to a ski resort. The Taiwanese student, we had to buy a lift ticket. She didn't speak Japanese, so I helped her. But when I went to the ticket counter, they looked at me, they looked at the Taiwanese student, and they started speaking Japanese to the Taiwanese student because she's Asian. So she understands Japanese, a white person doesn't. So I can never integrate into Japan, okay? The other ones are, this is less common, your culture isn't important, but please think of, for example, Germans after World War II. Germans after World War II, they were embarrassed by their country, their history. So if a German person went to America, maybe they didn't speak German in the supermarket or at school, maybe only in the household. So these are kind of the 4 ideas. I think for most of you, you're very proud to be Taiwanese, so your strategy will be separation or integration. It depends on how well you speak the language of that country. You will start as separation, and hopefully you will move to integration, but it's hard. Yeah, so that's another idea I introduce in my class at Seisen. Okay, that was a little challenging, but it's an interesting topic. So maybe we have a few more minutes. If people have any questions, they can ask me.
Okay, guys.